Hello and welcome to our Accessibility Mini Workshop designed to help you improve your skills around accessibility best practices. We at the Colorado Department of Public Safety are committed to full inclusion of all individuals. Let's begin with some background information. House Bill 211110 is the accessibility law for state and local governments. We must meet accessibility standards for all content, or we can face consequences that can include several options of monetary damages, because ultimately it is a civil rights violation. When we abide by this law, we are able to continue our mission of delivering critical public safety to all audiences in Colorado. Furthermore, it is really the right thing to do. Let's go over some information on how to use tables in our documents in an accessible way. This workshop today is geared mainly around tables in Google Docs, although there are aspects of it that can be applied to Google Sheets as well. In my experience, we tend to use tables quite frequently in our Google Docs for the look and organizational aspect of it. The first question you should be asking yourself before inserting tables in any document is, does this information really need to be in a table? Meaning, are there actual data points in there that could lend itself to a chart or a graph? Or are we just organizing textual data to make it look more appealing and format it around boxes? Tables will work better with numerical data, whereas if you are organizing text, then a better option would be to use lists. It could be numbered lists, depending on if there are specific steps, or an unordered list if you are just highlighting using some bullet points. To further explain this difference, we have two screenshots of the same document. It's a business charter document. It contains exactly the same content, but it's arranged differently. The top left example shows a business charter that is arranged entirely in tables. You can see there's columns, there's rows. Furthermore, there are merged cells as well. Again, all of this has been done for formatting purposes. But it is important to understand that this kind of formatting can definitely impact keyboard navigation and complicate screen reader navigation. Instead, if we take the same content and look at it in the bottom right example, it's taken all that information and put it under structured headings. And it's used lists to organize the information. The added advantage is that now we have an outline based off of those structured headings in our navigation pane. So all users can definitely benefit from this easier navigation. So it's important to understand that sometimes we just need to use tables, even in a Word document or a presentation. It's unavoidable. So in those scenarios, always provide a descriptive header row and column. So the titles for those rows and columns should definitely be there. The screen reader reads this, and the user will then know how the table is set up and organized. Very often, and a common mistake, is that the first header cell gets skipped. Please remember to always fill that in, otherwise it can lead to confusion on the table setup. So this cell right here should definitely get filled in with appropriate information. Now, when you are looking at the text inside the table, make sure that you're using normal text and you're not assigning like heading 1, heading 2 to text inside the table. Other best practices still apply. For example, you're using a black colored font, except when hyperlinking, trying not to underline anything unless it's hyperlinked, using a high color contrast, so on and so forth. So if we're talking about color, don't use color alone to convey meaning. So if I am just, if I have this table set up and I reference by saying, look at the pink cell or look at the green cells, for someone who has color blindness or has trouble differentiating color, they may not be able to tell the difference between the green and the pink. They're both like contrasted, right? Instead, you can reference it by saying, look under the column for leaves. A blue spruce with leaves has this amount, right? So on and so forth. So it is okay to use color, but it should not be the only way. You should have an additional method for people to understand what that color means. Also, be mindful of color contrast. So as you can see in this under tree, the third cell down, it says peach, but it's saying the peach in a color font that equals a peach colored font. And it's on a peach colored background, so it's just meshing into each other. So remember to use a high color contrast. Like mentioned earlier, merged cells can create confusion. So instead of merging cells, either put that in a different column or a row of its own, and just simply avoid merging cells in the midst of a table. It's very challenging for anyone to really understand, despite being a screen reader user. Any user will get confused by what does it mean that December is a break in information. Also, if you go and try to make a chart or graph out of it, it's going to skew the data as well. A quick shortcut is often when we have a large volume of data presented in a table and you have the table overflowing into multiple pages, it can get very frustrating if that header row does not get copied over from page to page, kind of like freezing the first row on a Google Sheet. So you lose your spot and understanding how that table is set up, and so you have to scroll all the way back. So in order to avoid that, you can click on the table, right click, and it'll give you the option to pin the header row. Also, if you hover over the table, you'll see those dots that appear, and that's the icon can show up for pinning, just as mentioned over here. So by pinning that header row, you don't have to keep scrolling up and down when dealing with large volumes of data. Very important, and we often do this. We take screenshots of tables and we put it in our presentations or in our Word documents. However, even if we provided alternative text for those images, first of all, it'll be very cumbersome to write the alternative text. And even if we did write the alternative text, for the screen reader who reads that alternative text, it can be extremely confusing because you are outlining each and every column, each and every row, and each and every data point. So as you can see, that's not a very efficient use of time. Also, have you ever tried copy pasting from an image and you realize how frustrating that is? So instead of putting an image of a chart or an image of a table, put the actual table in there if it cannot be avoided. So for some further information and practice, again, it's important that we identify, first of all, does this information need to be in a table? If so, then here are some best practices. First of all, use those descriptive headers like we mentioned earlier. Always pin that header row. Unmerge the cells. Don't use color alone. And then avoid using bullet points inside cells of a table as well, because that can also complicate matters. So we have two examples here. The first example is how to request a time off in Chronos. So the first question is, does it even need to be in a table? And the answer is no. I can put all of this information, simply copy paste it, and put it as a list. So the first few cells would look like, or first few steps would look like how to request time off, click on the gear menu, so on and so forth, or click on the pop out rather. So I can go ahead and do the next step and put that in there and create my list, so on and so forth. I can take these images and put it as part of my guide, making sure that I'm putting alternative text in there. Or if there's no need for that, I can omit the pictures as well, but sometimes it's a good alternative. However, using pictures inside the table can also lead to confusion. So let's try to avoid that. So as you can see, it's very easy to present the same information in a non-tabular fashion. What happens if I do have to use a table? So the second example is one where I absolutely need to use this table. So with this situation, there are a few things that need to be fixed. Number one, as you can see, this first cell is empty. We need to put a description on it. Now, when I clicked on the cell, you can see this pops up. If I, by using that, I can pin the header row if needed. Right click and I can pin the header row. First of all, I need to put a description of what is in this column. in this cell. For example, I can say characters, right? Also, I'm noticing that this entire row, it has merged cells in it. So I should go ahead and right click and I can unmerge the cells, okay? Also, I am using color alone to denote meaning. I'm saying the green cells are the vegan option. So I need some other way of mentioning this. I can say, look under favorite foods column to understand some of the vegan options that are there, such as grapes. Okay. So these are some different ways that we can practice. We would highly encourage you to go into Saba and access the course for tables and take the short 3-question quiz for accessibility for tables. And this way you can show that you are making progress on your accessibility goals. We really appreciate your time and your effort. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.